Welcome back. We closed the self-awareness module by acknowledging we each have implicit bias, that we will all get some cross-cultural interactions wrong, and, as Anne Sibley O'Brien said, we find our, quote, ever-changing edge of growth and move forward, unquote. To explore social awareness, CASEL emphasizes key competencies: taking others' perspectives, recognizing strengths, demonstrating empathy, showing concern, understanding and expressing gratitude, identifying social norms, and recognizing situational demands and opportunities. These skills, along with understanding how organizations and systems influence behavior, are crucial for fostering inclusion and equity. This growing awareness calls on both individuals and organizations to ground our efforts in empathy. Empathy is an essential tool for incorporating diverse perspectives into our lives and into our classrooms. Social awareness, coupled with empathy, guides us in considering the effects and impact of our actions and decisions on others. This allows us to build healthy, strong relationships based on mutual respect and understanding. It also places us in a position to begin addressing systematic inequities, making social awareness a fundamental part of this process. As discussed in the context of self-awareness, being explicit is crucial. I encourage you to write the word empathy in large letters at the top of your next journal page and leave the page blank for now. This act serves as a reminder that we all possess the power to bring ourselves, our students, and our classrooms closer to a state of equity and inclusivity. In this module, we will tackle challenges related to discussing race and culture, the danger of false narratives, and the tools needed to develop social awareness. By honing these competencies, individuals can better recognize and respond to inequities within systems, identify root causes, and develop strategies to create stronger systems and practices. Reflective Opportunity 1. In preparation for our first speaker, open your journal and make 3 columns. Without doing any research, make a list of things in the first column that you know or associate with Haiti. Next, read Auntie Luce's talking paintings, including the author's note. In the second column of your journal, make a list of impressions and the new information you gained about Haiti based on what you found in the book. In the third column, list the things written and illustrated in the book that you recognize you need more context to understand.
Reading Auntie Luce's talking paintings was an opening for me to the Haitian and Haitian American experience, and a window into the surface and shallow culture of our Haitian students. Francie Latour's author note was the first place I saw the alignment and severe misalignment of 2 wars of independence, America's and Haiti's. To know that Haitians were forced to pay France back for their very own bodies speaks to a pain and anger that I can feel here, but cannot begin to know the enormity of. And while I am no economist, Francie Latour's note that Haiti was forced to pay France the equivalent of $20 billion speaks to why Haiti is on the list of the world's poorest nations. That poverty is not a reflection of their ability as a nation, but a reflection of how they've been punished as a nation. Auntie Luce's talking paintings led me to look for articles on Haiti and to read the Haitian American novels I discovered on the I'm Your Neighbor Books Immigrant and New Generation book database. Each new bit of information and empathy and wonder I get from these sources feeds my knowledge, but also reminds me that there will always be an unknowing. That unknowing is not, however, a stopping place, but an ever-changing edge of growth.
What Kirsten is describing is the interplay of cultural competence and cultural humility, 2 forces that need to be a part of your ongoing social development as an individual and as an educator. Cultural competence can be understood as learning information about communities or people. The acquisition of that knowledge is never finite and never finished. Individuals grow and change. Cultures forever evolve and shift. As academic anthropologist Brian Street once said, culture is a verb. Kirsten mentions reading articles about Haitian history, culture, and current affairs. What she has learned is informative, and perhaps even transformative. But what she reads will be an incomplete picture of Haitian individuals and the vast diversity of experience within the Haitian and Haitian American community. Cultural humility is a state of mind. It requires that we have a sense of our own identity and display the characteristics of lifelong learning. It encompasses curiosity, a thirst for understanding, a willingness to learn from others, and, at its heart, an act of empathy. Building on the experience of exploring the beautiful prose and illustrations in Auntie Luce's talking paintings by reading novels and memoirs by Haitians shows a curiosity, a thirst for understanding, and a willingness to learn from others, and is a proven connection to empathy. Even better is starting conversations with the Haitian community and making one-on-one connections with the parents of your Haitian students. Knowing individuals helps us see the enormity of the human experience and should leave us feeling humbled. When you look at the 3 columns of your journal, has your cultural competence and cultural humility grown with the reading and exploring of Auntie Luce's talking paintings? Practicing cultural humility is a commitment to self-reflection and continuous growth. That commitment includes recognizing your own cultural biases and how these influence your teaching. Educators who practice cultural humility critically assess and adapt their methods to ensure inclusivity and acknowledge when their approach may not resonate with diverse students. Valuing the voices of students and families, they seek feedback to better understand and incorporate cultural practices and expectations. Cultural humility is an ongoing journey of listening, adapting, and creating a more equitable and inclusive classroom for all. Reflective opportunity 2. Reflect on a situation where greater cultural competence or humility could have changed an outcome. Be specific and honest in your reflection, as this exercise is for your eyes only. Afterward, consider identifying any implicit biases that may have influenced the situation. When you come back, we will hear from author Francie Latour. She will express what it can feel like to be a member of a community that fellow citizens have numerous misconceptions about. Keep your cultural humility in mind as you listen to this author and educator, and note where your cultural competence grows.
Hello, my name is Francie Latour. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Boston, Massachusetts. I am a writer, educator, mother, daughter of Haitian immigrants, and I'm the author of this picture book right here, Auntie Luce's Talking Paintings. I am also the co-founder and director of a social justice and racial justice education project based here in Boston called We the People. We with 2 E's, because we work with little ones a lot. We do a lot of work with schools, museums, libraries, community-based organizations in New England and across the country to find creative ways to engage kids and the adults in their lives in conversation and art making around identity, culture, history, and justice. And so that includes some really important topics like race, racism, immigrant experiences, and the importance of belonging. We live in a world where some children are taught very early that they do not have a right to be here, that they are not worth being celebrated in their lives, and in their cultures. That's a problem for all of us, right? It's a problem because these are messages that block kids' ability to live up to their human promise. And when kids don't live up to the fullness of their human promise, we all lose, right, as a human family. I grew up with a really deep sense of joy and cultural pride around being Haitian. My parents gave me a real understanding of Haiti as a place that was, breathtaking in its beauty and its history. I learned about the Haitian Revolution, where enslaved Black rebels did the seemingly impossible, right? This is so central to what Tishu, the character in Auntie Luce's talking paintings, learned through her aunt. Enslaved Black rebels rose up, defeated Europe's biggest military powers, and birthed the first free Black nation in the Atlantic world. Now, when I got to school, I started to hear all of these other stories about Haiti, portraying Haiti as, the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, as corrupt, as violent, as broken. I remember kids teasing me about practicing voodoo with no understanding that voodoo is a deeply spiritual faith practice that many Haitians practice. And that was actually very important to planning the early rebellions that led to the Haitian Revolution. And so it was confusing. It felt hurtful. It felt shaming. And as a kid, I didn't know what to say back. I think for immigrants of color whose safety and dignity is under constant attack, storytelling is really, really crucial to affirming our humanity and countering all of these negative stereotypes and the marginalization that we feel. This past year, actually, I had an opportunity to do some author visits and read Auntie Luce's talking paintings at schools with recently arrived migrant families, Haitian families. And you can really see the power of affirmation that a picture book can create for migrant kids in this moment when we create these spaces that affirm their culture and their humanity. These kids, they light up from a deep, deep place. Language also plays a really important role in this too. Auntie Luce was recently translated into Haitian Creole, and so when kids hear the language that is spoken at home suddenly filling their learning spaces, that's also deeply affirming. We the People has a workshop called Who Gets to Make History, where we explore statues and monuments with children. And when I'm talking with them about how history gets made, I often compare it to something that happens when siblings fight. So, something goes down with me and my big brother, and we run to the nearest adult to tell them what happened. Right? That's history. What happened? So my brother, being stronger and faster, almost always got there first. And he tells the story of what happened. And I'm like, wait a minute, time out. That is not what happened. Not at all, not even a little bit. and it feels really, really unfair. Any kid who has a sibling connects to this immediately. They've all experienced it. And so I tell them, when you're looking at a famous monument or you're reading about history in a textbook, most of the time what you're seeing and reading about is the story of the person who got there first. The story of the person who grabbed the pen, or grabbed all the pens, controlled the printing presses. And so, now that we know this and we understand what it feels like, we have the power to look at a piece of history, at a statue, at a monument, and ask a question, a really important question. And that question is, whose version of history is this? Whose version of what happened is this? And whose voices are missing? And what can we do to make things fair by making sure those missing voices are heard?
It goes without saying that there are times when the resources we need to build our cultural competence are not available. The voices, at least in published resources, can be missing. My first days working in a school were in the month after 9/11. The school was in a white majority city that had been resettling Somali Muslim refugees. In the polarization of post 9/11, I looked for books with Muslim characters to increase the cultural competence of the white majority teachers and students. I also sought those stories to give the Somali students a literary respite at a time when their faith was under national scrutiny and attack. But besides reference books on world religion, there were no children's or young adult books featuring Muslim characters at that time. Without community-created and centered Muslim narratives, the non-Muslim community was free to consume the abundant false narratives being spread about Islam. Today, with the growing diversity of own voices and lived experience Muslim titles available to us, we have the opportunity and the imperative to combat persistent false narrative about the Muslim community with books. M.O. Yüksel, the author of In My Mosque and many other titles, shares what false narratives persist about the American and global Muslim community and how the sharing of new narratives, new books, boosts a crucial social awareness.
Hello, thank you for joining me. I'm going to share the inspiration behind my book, In My Mosque. I was inspired to write In My Mosque as a result of a tragic, horrific event. I started writing the day of the New Zealand mosque shooting was broadcast in March 15, 2019. I wanted to help in some way, and since I'm a writer, I wrote a story about mosques to help demystify and dispel negative myths and share my personal experience attending this special place of worship. This is an image of the mosque and the old man who was standing at the entrance, who unknowingly greeted the gunman, saying, "Hello, brother." This old man was the first victim of over 50 worshippers killed that day. This gunman, a white supremacist terrorist, live streamed his killing spree on social media. Before doing so, he wrote a 45-page manifesto about how he was going to save the world by killing Muslims. Anti-Muslim hate crimes were and are still happening, not only in Europe, but here at home in the US too. How does one become so hateful and racist, I wondered. So I did some research and found that most Americans don't know a real Muslim person and therefore rely on the media for information. According to a study by Media Tenor, a media content analysis firm, 90% of US TV news portrays Islam and Muslims negatively. As a point of comparison, North Korea, a nation that has openly threatened to bomb the US, receives coverage that is 73% negative, less negative than a diverse religious community of 1.9 billion Muslim people, of which the vast majority are US allies. And it's not just the cable networks, nor a function of the horrific acts of 9/11. A study conducted by 416 Labs showed that over 25 years, that is before 9/11, the New York Times portrayed Islam and Muslims more negatively than cancer or cocaine. Fear, unfortunately, is more influential than fact. Words and images, as we know, are powerful. Hollywood, the media, and politicians have a history of depicting Muslims and Islam through a limited and biased lens. The lack of proper representation continues to impact Muslims all around the world. Mass media and politicians use words and images to other, dehumanize, and scapegoat marginalized groups. This leads to discrimination, racism, and violence. Let's look at some of the common stereotypes about Muslims. For example, Muslims are a monolith. They are all one race, nationality, speak the same language, share the same culture. For example, all Muslims are Arab or South Asian or from the Middle East. Or all Muslims have dark skin and dress and look a certain way. Or the most popular, all Muslims are terrorists or violent, or Muslim women are oppressed, or Islam is a new phenomenon and Muslims are recent immigrants to the US. These stereotypes and misconceptions are dangerous and dehumanizing. According to sociologists, the process of dehumanization is a process of slowly moving people out of the moral protective zone we have as humans. We start using words and images to dehumanize a group of people that political leaders and the mass media have told us is the cause of all of our pain and suffering. Once they are in moral exclusion, they are no longer protected but by what we believe is human basic rights. It then makes it okay to physically hurt them, as the example of the New Zealand gunmen or the genocide taking place in Gaza. Stereotype number one: Muslims are a monolith. There are approximately 2 billion Muslims in the world, or about 25% of the world population. Muslims are a diverse group. For example, Muslims are one of the most ethnically diverse groups in America. Overall, around the world, Muslims are diverse in race, ethnicity, nationality, and they speak multiple languages. Only 20% of Muslims worldwide are Arabs. Many Arabs are Christians and of other faith. About one third of all Muslims worldwide live in South Asia. Indonesia is the country with the largest Muslim population. More Muslims live in Indonesia than all of the Middle East combined. But unfortunately, we don't know this. In the news, we mostly hear about the Middle East. India, China, and Europe have large Muslim minority populations. Stereotype number two: Muslims are terrorists. According to ISPU, the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, the majority of American fatalities are at the hands of extremists or right wing terrorists. Enforcement agencies ranked anti government extremists as a greater threat than the terrorist organizations like Al Qaeda. Stereotype number three: Muslim women are oppressed. One of the most misunderstood areas about Islam is the topic of women. from misconceptions about women's roles and rights to images of Muslim women covered in black from head to toe. This is a topic that is often stereotyped in public perceptions. As an example, here is Fatma al Fihri in my book, One Wish. Fatma al Fihri lived in the 9th century in Fez, Morocco. She was a Muslim woman who built the world's oldest continuously operating university in the world over 1,200 years ago. And her university was a model for other universities, such as the first ones in Europe, such as Bologna, and then later Oxford, Cambridge, and Harvard in the US. So we have an example of a Muslim woman who had the right to own property, she had the right to inherit money, and she had the right to purchase and own land. She was an active member of her society, and she had many rights. And again, this was over 1,200 years ago that she had these rights. There are many female Muslim rulers. In fact, there were 12 heads of state or presidents around the world who were Muslim women. But here in America, we still have yet to have a female president. And stereotype number 4, all Muslims are new immigrants. Many historians claim that the earliest Muslims came from the Senegambian region of Africa in the early 14th century. They were Moors expelled from Spain who made their way to the Caribbean and possibly to the Gulf of Mexico. Also, 15 to 30% of enslaved Africans were Muslim. As you know, slavery began since the founding of the US in 1776. So Muslims have been here since the founding of America. They are not new immigrants. Muslims were called Muhammadian during the 17 and 1800s. Another example is Thomas Jefferson ordered the Quran in 1760, 11 years before he wrote the Declaration of Independence. He was fascinated by the commitment to equality and social justice in the Islamic faith. He hosted an iftar dinner during Ramadan in 1805 for a Muslim ambassador from Tunisia. And you can read more about this in this book, Thomas Jefferson's Quran. On the left side of the screen is an example of a Muslim slave, Yaro Mahmud or Yaro Mamot, who was brought to America when he was 16 years old, sold in Maryland, and won his freedom after his slave owner died. He was well respected and was one of the first black men to own land in Georgetown. He was also a financier. He gave loans to other black people who had won their freedom, and he helped build a community. I also want to share some statistics with you. This chart, although a bit dated, shows that Muslims experience the most religious discrimination. 60% of American Muslims report experiencing some frequency of faith based discrimination, higher than other groups. Among Muslims, the most likely to say they experience discrimination are women, young people, and Arabs. 42% of Muslim families with kids in grade school report that their children experience bullying because of their faith, higher than any other faith community surveyed. It's important to note that bias based bullying has more negative effect on children than the regular variety, as it is seen to be based on an integral part of who they are, something they can't change. So the child anticipates it to keep happening over and over. What was especially unsettling, however, was the fact that a quarter of the bullying incidents involved a teacher or an administrator as the bully. This underscores the need for better training of educators. Islamophobia is about fear, and when we are afraid, according to neuroscience research, we are not only more likely to be biased towards people who are different from us, but we are more likely to accept conformity and authoritarianism. Fear kills freedom. Education is focused on understanding our students and meeting their needs. How are world events affecting your students? Even even if you don't have marginalized students in your class, it's important to teach about diverse stories, about different cultures, religions, and races, because we live in a world where it's become even smaller due to the digital age. We are impacted by the news, by what we see on social media. We are required to be global citizens, and we are required to have an understanding of global citizenship. Because what we don't understand, we fear, and these thoughts and beliefs lead to negative actions such as in person and online bullying, harassment, and how we view the world and the actions we choose. Some of your students might be Arab or South Asian and have Muslim names such as Yusuf, Amira, or Kabir, and they may not be Muslim. Some of your students, on the other hand, may be Asian like me or white and may have American names such as Mindy or Rhonda or Mike, and they will be white and I'm sorry, they will be Muslim, such as myself. For example, if you saw me on the street, you wouldn't necessarily think I'm Muslim. By my appearance, I'm Asian, I don't wear a hijab, I don't have anything that would identify my religion, but I am Muslim. And we don't all speak the same language. I don't speak Arabic. I speak Turkish and Uzbek and some Spanish. And we don't all share the same culture or eat the same Middle Eastern foods, although I love Middle Eastern food. And as the saying goes, you can't judge a book by its cover. We also need to examine and understand our own biases and misconceptions as educators. This book called Cultivating Genius is a really wonderful resource. The book talks about how to unpack our own histories, identities, biases, and assumptions, and tensions with racism and other oppressions that we have been taught and experienced or practiced. The author, Goldie Mohammed, poses some questions to ask ourselves, such as: who am I? Which ideologies and social conditioning have shaped my knowledge and perspectives of people, of Black and Brown children? How will each lesson or unit plan help students to know something about their identities or the identities of others? So, knowing ourselves and knowing our students prepares us and young people to live joyfully in the world, a world that may tell your students negative things about who they are. This is why young people need to know themselves as well as others who may be different from them. This knowledge will help prevent them from oppressing people who are different from them in the future. It also teaches young people how to love and live with differences as they grow older. Finally, here are some resources which provide a lot of wonderful materials, such as free lesson plans and educational materials. Thank you so much for joining me and for your dedication to nurturing the social and emotional growth of your students. I hope you found this session helpful.
In My Mosque came out during the pandemic, and I remember dropping the book on Pius Ali's doorstep. Pius is a co-founder of I'm Your Neighbor Books and a Muslim immigrant from Ghana who leads crucial cross-faith community conversations. I was so eager to see what he thought of the joy that I saw emanating from every page. He called me an hour later and said, "The book, I'm mad at it." How did I get this so wrong? What, as a non-Muslim, had I not seen? You know that I've spent all my years in the United States talking about Islam to non-Muslims. Yes, I said. He replied, "This book in 32 pages has done more to show the joy and generosity of the Muslim community than I ever have. Not in 32 years could I do this." In My Mosque has been removed from schools by official book bans and by soft bans. Soft bans are the hiding, removal, or the passing over of the opportunity to stock or feature a book because of a perceived risk that the book will be challenged. Calling to mind our exploration of cultural competence and cultural humility, I ask what is more harmful, the sharing of Muslim books or the sharing of false narratives about Muslims? Reflective opportunity 3. In your journal, make a list of the false narratives about Islam that you have heard shared in the past. Read In My Mosque and journal about new narratives or feelings the book is sharing about the Muslim community.
Exploring immigrant and new generation picture books individually and collectively allows us to expand what we know about others and builds our cultural competency. You may notice that some of the discussion questions in the back of the Welcoming Library books actually assist you with those competencies and allow you to share this new learning with your students. I suggest you look at the question about the hijab in the back of In My Mosque. The framing of the question, written with Muslim community members, gave me an ease to talk about a piece of clothing with deep culture connections. The question also invites us to let go of assumptions about hijabs, including that hijab is the one name for Muslim head coverings. It's not. Getting rid of assumptions and embracing the vastness of cultural knowledge we have yet to discover is not only an opening to cultural humility, but it's also fun. We teachers love to learn. Did M.O. Yüksel's talk prompt you to be more open to the stories of the Muslim community? Consider where you experience discomfort, where gaps in your knowledge lie, and where you need to grow. These reflections are crucial to identify areas where you need to develop your cultural responsiveness. Look for role models in your community to do this work. For example, in my community, Pius Ali, who Kirsten mentioned, helps non-Muslims connect to new understanding of Islam. M.O. Yüksel, although she may not be in your local community, is in the Pine community, and she is in the larger community of book creators and authors whose own voices and lived experiences are expanding our knowledge as educators. Some educators express a hesitancy about reading and leading discussions outside of their cultural experience. What if, for example, if after reading In My Mosque, a student raises their hand and says, "Why do they pray on rugs?" That question could very well freeze an educator. First, the they could sound like the student is othering Muslims, which you may or may not be ready to address. And second, as an educator, you may not know the answer to the meaning of a prayer rug. But just because you might not have the cultural competence to answer your students' questions, you can show cultural humility, and in doing so, model it for your students. Imagine yourself answering, "I don't have the answers right now, but I'm committed to learning more. I'll do some research and get back to you with accurate information." You can model methods by adding, for example, "I'm going to look for books and resources created by the Muslim community. And if I can, I will talk directly with a Muslim leader right here in our town." The educators in the Pine Project found this approach transformative. The approach acknowledged current limitations, showed a willingness to learn, and prioritized the accuracy of information. Elementary students, especially those who haven't been exposed to many diverse characters in literature, may initially feel uncertain when encountering the unfamiliar. One educator emphasized that such moments provide valuable opportunities to teach that cultural discoveries, like the meaning of a prayer rug, are a dynamic and evolving process. Again, as Brian Street said, culture is a verb. Learning and understanding are ongoing processes. As the pilot project's educators' own comfort with these conversations grew, so did their students' ability to engage thoughtfully and respectfully. This process is aligned with the key elements of social awareness: taking others' perspectives, recognizing strengths, demonstrating empathy, understanding diverse social norms, and responding effectively to the unique demands of different situations. By fostering these skills, we create a more inclusive and culturally responsive environment that honors the diverse backgrounds and experiences of all students. Reflective opportunity 4. In your journal, recall a time when you lacked a certain cultural competence. Write out the pathway you took to gain that cultural competence directly from community-created resources. If you haven't had this experience yet, now is the time to plan for it. What does the cultural humility you need to put in place look like? The topic that calls for the highest degree of cultural competence and cultural humility commitment is, of course, race. While race is a social construct, racism is a social reality. And until racism stops corroding those who enact it and those whom it harms, it is our job as educators to center our learning on the history and impact of racism and on the latest classroom anti-racism thinking and actions. We will make mistakes and more mistakes in this work, but the biggest mistake is not educating ourselves and acting. Our students' lives depend on it. The future of this nation depends on it. We will offer some first-person narratives and resources below, but let's begin by debunking some of the things that hold us back from these conversations. One commonly held misconception about race is that the conversation is not appropriate at certain ages. The Children's Community School in Philadelphia gathered research that counters this concern. Their graphic, "They're not too young to talk about race," emphasizes the importance of discussing race with children from a young age. The key takeaways are: babies start noticing race as early as 3 months of age. Racial biases can develop between 4 and 5 years. Teachers and adults play a crucial role in shaping children's attitudes towards race. And silence about race can reinforce racism. Active conversations and open discussions are crucial in helping children form healthy interactions and relationships that occur between racial or ethnic groups. To reinforce children's capacity to explore race, racism, and social justice, let's listen to Francie Latour, co-founder of We the People, an organization grounded in the belief that if kids can understand fairness, they can understand justice, and that adults play a huge role in connecting kids' sense of fairness in their own lives to larger issues of injustice in the world.
So We the People has been developing interactive programming mostly for kindergarten through 8 students on topics like race and racism since about 2015. And so now I feel really comfortable being in a space with kids to talk about it. But when I think back to what was going on with my own parenting at that time, I was feeling pretty overwhelmed, trying to figure out how to talk about race and racism with my kids who are biracial. Right. So, what do you say when your child, learns about Martin Luther King and starts asking, why is it that people who look like daddy used to kill people who look like mommy? It's a very intense question. And so when we don't have the racial literacy tools ourselves, it's hard to support kids in developing their racial literacy, to help them make sense of what it is that they are learning about and noticing in the world. Over the years, we've been really lucky to get to work with a wide range of school systems and communities. And one thing I encounter pretty regularly in predominantly white communities is, and it's always been really striking to me, there is a sense of real anxiety that parents, caregivers, educators have around exactly how, when, under what conditions will we be talking with their children about race and racism. There tends to be an intense focus on questions like, what words are we going to use? Are you going to use this word? Are you going to use that word? What is the exact picture book you're going to use? How was this picture book vetted for a child of a particular age or developmental stage? Right, so a lot of focus and energy spent trying to create this controlled environment to talk about this thing. And the reason that it's so striking to me is that there really is no such thing as choosing a perfect time or place or picture book or developmental stage to introduce white children to race and racism. It's a story we tell ourselves. It's a fiction that we can control how our kids get introduced to these things. And I feel like on some level we know this, right? So we know kids notice everything. From an early age, they're noticing patterns in the world around them, and their brains are constantly trying to make sense of the patterns. What do the patterns mean? And so when it comes to race and racism, a kid trying to make sense of a pattern they see in the world can sound like this, right? So I'm on the bus with my 4-year-old, and he turns to me and says, "Mommy, why are all the bus drivers black?" And so as adults, we have to be able to intervene and meet that child in that moment in a way that affirms them by validating what they just noticed, right? So I'm really glad you brought that up. You're noticing something really important. B, counters the biased, anti-Black, anti-people of color, anti-LGBTQIA+, like logics, right, that kids are bound to be exposed to about why so many bus drivers are Black. Yes? We also need to meet them in that moment in a way that makes our values of justice and fairness clear. And that taps into their innate sense of fairness by giving them a chance to be on the side of justice in some way, however small. The social psychologist, Howard Stevenson, said, "You're always communicating with your kids about racism, whether you talk about it or not." So when we talk about our kids with race and racism, we're communicating things to them. When we don't talk about race and racism, we're communicating things to them about those things. And so when we fail to intervene or delay these important conversations for the perfect moment or the perfect picture book, what we're doing is we're creating a vacuum for a child to start absorbing all of the biased, anti-Black, anti-immigrant ways of interpreting the patterns that they're seeing in the world. When I am talking with kids about race and racism, I usually start with a very open question, which is, just tell me one thing you know or that you've heard about race or racism. And this is a question that creates like a really palpable energy in the room, because kids are looking around like, okay, we're allowed to talk about this. Are you sure? They suddenly realize that they're being invited to talk about a thing that they've been told by adults to not talk about, that they've been told they're too young to understand. And they will start to say all the things. They respond, they engage, right? This is a really powerful and necessary step, right? The inability to talk about race is in part a problem of literacy. And so if we're ever going to interrupt this generational paralysis, where this cultural paralysis, this national paralysis, where we can't talk about race, We need to be creating spaces for conversations like this all the time.
Francie Latour's assurance that our students have the capacity to process the complexities of race, racism, positive identity development, and social justice reinforces my belief that I need to do a better job talking with my students about race. Why? Because the research indicates that silence about race can reinforce racism. Reflective Opportunity 5. Before we hear from educator Javier Bertana and Leonardo Carranza, please return to the picture book Abuelita and Me. Think about the silence on the bus as Abuelita was physically confronted and verbally attacked. How could someone of any age stand up on that bus and say, "This is not fair"? How could that change the impact that Leonardo covers in this next piece?
After the incident, it takes 5 picture book spreads before Abuelita and her granddaughter are ready to re-enter the world. Talk to us about what choices you made to allow the two of them the space and time to heal.
Yes, it takes a long time. And I was really purposeful in that. I wanted to be authentic with the amount of time that it might take the little girl to actually process all the harm. And to be perfectly honest, like when I first wrote the story, like my first draft, it did not include them getting on the bus. It just, for me, it just didn't feel right that after what they had experienced, that they could possibly get on the bus again. But it was like working with my editor at ANIC, Claire Caldwell, and she was really helpful in this, and and her insight was really important to the story, that she was like, yeah, they need to get back on the bus again. That's really important. And so yeah, that's why it takes a long time. I really wanted to be respectful of how harmful that had been for them, and give the characters the time that they needed to be able to process. So she goes through sadness and anger. She wants to hide in her room. She doesn't even feel like playing with her grandmother. She doesn't even feel like eating her favorite foods. And it's only when she sees how sad her abuelita is that she's able to really tap into anger and rage against what they had experienced. And it's in terms of funneling that anger that she's able to muster up the courage to face the bus driver again.
As an author and co-founder of Diverse Bookfinder, Anne Sibley O'Brien has thought deeply about how we can do this work with books. Listen as she shares how Diverse Bookfinder has scaffolded progressive conversations about race using picture books. Anne will end with an outline of her Renew rubric that she created to give guidelines for holding constructive conversations with students using diverse books. In the resource section of this page, you will find a link to a deeper dive into both tools.
Children actively negotiate messages about race, trying to figure out what it all means and how they feel about the messages. If educators don't create intentional conversations, students learn about race from the dominant culture. An example of misinformation from the white dominant culture in the U.S. is color blindness, which posits, "I don't see color, I just see people." This is an example some may have encountered, felt comfortable with, and maybe even confident using as their window or door into community. But in numerous studies, it's been shown to be absolutely false from the perspective of how the brain works, and to be not just unhelpful, but actually harmful from a social point of view. If we don't give students a hand, they will figure out their own ideas, which generally are not going to be the healthiest or most accurate way of understanding it. So at a project I'm part of, the Diverse Bookfinder, we developed a scaffolding for conversation about race in 4 steps. The first one is a celebration of differences. Just saying, look at this, we're all different, isn't it amazing? So we talk about different colors of skin, textures of hair, colors and shapes of eyes, different cultures, food, dress, traditions, etc. And just noticing that this is what it means to be human. Look at this, we're all different. And there's so many ways in which we're all the same. The second stage is beyond the body, stories we tell about race. Race is also the stories we tell based on the groups people belong to. What stories and stereotypes have you heard? Are they true? Are they the same? The third stage is moving from race to interpersonal racism. And the fourth, moving from interpersonal to systemic racism. So depending on your students' experiences, their developmental levels, and the conversations they've already had or not had, you can find a way to have conversations about race. And all of it can start with books as a diving board to jump into discussion. You'll find more resources at diversebookfinder.org, including scripts, suggestions of books, and other references. When sharing a book and discussing it with students, our goal is to give students language and permission to say what they're actually thinking about race in order to support them to develop healthy ideas and strengthen their skills to interact effectively in a multiracial society. To highlight some best practices that can aid these conversations, I developed a rubric with the acronym RENEW. R. First, review. Centering student responses. What do they notice about the book? What do they see? This can start with a book jacket before a word of text is read. E. Explore. Asking questions to build on student responses about what they see. Introducing topics about differences, especially if students don't raise it themselves. This may be where they need permission to voice what they're actually thinking. N. Neighbors. Students may have absorbed the idea that perceived differences make people weird or strange or scary. At this point, it can be helpful to guide them to notice commonalities. How is this character like you? What are some of the same things they do that you enjoy? E. Education. At some point in response to student comments, there may be a point where you realize that information or possibly corrections would be useful. You can try repeating the comment and asking for student input, which may supply the needed redirection. And finally, welcoming. There is substantial research demonstrating the impact of group-wide values reinforced by leaders. Does your class or school have, or might you develop a slogan, a list of character traits, or a community agreement?
Understanding and learning to align our intentions with the impact these intentions may have is crucial. As educators in America, we operate in a diverse and global society. As we strive to foster inclusive environments in our classrooms, it's vital to recognize that our classrooms are microcosms of a broader interconnected world. Educators play a pivotal role not only in helping students cultivate curiosity about different cultures, but also in modeling healthy ways of engaging with and perceiving different cultures and identities. By applying components of social awareness, such as understanding diverse perspectives, acknowledging strengths, and demonstrating empathy, we prepare our students to navigate and contribute positively to our global society. This approach not only enriches the educational experience, but also equips students with the skills and sensitivity needed to thrive in an increasingly interconnected world. This approach ultimately can foster a more inclusive global community where respect for difference is the norm. Think about the girl in Abuelita and Me, who had the courage to return to the bus. If she had the courage to face that bus driver, I know you can find the courage you need to do this work. Earlier, I spoke about looking for role models in this work. Aris Ayala is mine and will lead us in our conversation into its next phase, inclusion.
I love languages, and I love how words can have multiple meanings, and I love when those meanings can intersect in multiple ways, like the word inclusion. In its simplest form, it means to include. In mineralogy, inclusions are the materials that are trapped inside a mineral while it is forming. In mathematics, inclusion is the idea that the contents of one object are also within another object. In politics, it means to include people from different walks of life, especially those who have experienced any form of discrimination, in order to have a robust and participatory democracy. Being a child of immigrants provided a necessary lens for the type of leader I'd become. My Nicaraguan mother and my Mexican father, both people raised in completely different cultures, yet similar in their languages and customs, both influenced and painted colors on this lens. Both created inclusions in me about what it meant to be Latinos, a beautiful amalgamation of indigenous and African roots, about what it meant to eat tortillas, nourishing your body and spirit, and about what it meant to embody si se puede, the grit that we all need to survive in a world that wasn't designed for us. This is necessary texturized protection, for the experience of a brown kid in a white world is anything but politically inclusive, but creates inclusions that shape who you are. Growing up on the west side of Chicago, Humboldt Park to be exact, taught me to drop to the ground when there were drive-bys, and that when someone called 911, we really didn't matter. But at least we could bathe in the sprinkles of an open fire hydrant on a hot summer day, blare salsa and rancheras all night, and eat paletas con los vecinos. Just a 5-mile drive east proved to be even more dangerous though, because that meant experiencing people ignoring mi mami because of her accent, suspicious stares when we'd walk into stores, and the constant mispronunciation of our names. These experiences or inclusions shaped the leader I am now. I pride myself in being a leader that elevates and celebrates our school's community members, whether they are students or adults. A leader that is consistent in action and messaging, and a leader that makes decisions through this very lens, always holding that decisions are like waves in an ocean. They impact the immediate community and have lasting effects on the broader community. Similar to the mathematical definition of inclusion, I embody the Mayan belief of Inlak Esh, which means I am you and you are me. As I lead our community as a principal, every single decision doesn't just impact my community, but it also impacts me. The reverse is also true. Any decision that I make for myself doesn't just impact me, it also impacts my community. This belief system helps me care for my community and helps me tend to it, so that it becomes a place where adults and children of all walks of life are embraced and validated, especially those whose first language isn't English, those who have traversed numerous countries to arrive here, and those who seek a safe space to be their full, unapologetic selves. This belief system helps me be accountable to my community. It also helps me tend to myself, the kid from Humboldt Park, hijo de inmigrantes, all while fostering an inclusive and breathing environment. Why is this important? As educators, our role is to care for the students and families that come to our doors. Care doesn't just mean celebrating each other. It means pushing each other to continue developing and elevating. This can only begin with relationships, because relationships chart a path to effective communication and honest conversations. It is within these honest conversations where we can explore the notions of who we are and how we relate to each other. At the school where I am principal, we couldn't have had the deep conversations about biases and racism without the relationships we have with each other. One way we build relationships is by using what we call home groups. These groups consist of diverse groups of people within our school. Home groups connect at the beginning of our professional development sessions and discuss a combination of light-hearted questions and/or thought-provoking prompts. Over time, while being held and seen by their support system, the home group, these conversations facilitate opportunities for individuals to interrogate personal and social identities, especially if they are people that belong to a privileged group. Intentional practice like creating diverse home groups is one facet of the ways we are creating an inclusive environment. Another layer to this is the way leadership models problem solving, cultural competency, and staying focused on the goal of serving students. As a leader in my school, I've had to be a consistent role model while having to tap into my own resilience in the face of uncomfortable and difficult situations. A time that sticks out in my mind is when a member of our community wrote a racist comment in an end-of-the-year staff survey. What kind of leader would I be if I didn't address this comment? I felt anxiety and discomfort leading up to speaking about it, mostly because I am a queer brown person addressing a group of mostly white staff to undo racism, which shouldn't solely fall on my shoulders. However, at a staff meeting, I showed our staff the comment, unpacked a portion of it so people could understand how problematic the remark was, and urged folks to interrogate their internal schemas. As educators of children and adults, we have a duty to continuously be curious, reflect, and learn. Please be aware that before I undertook this task, I had to take preventative measures. I had to prepare my Black, Brown, Asian, and Indigenous staff members. I offered my support to discuss and/or analyze the comment through a group circle prior to our staff meeting. I did this because this group of educators needed to be seen and validated. The comment had the potential of hurting a part of their identity, parts or whole pieces that they have tirelessly protected their entire existence. As their administrator, I needed to show up for them, while at the same time, I needed to be shown up for. In Lakesh. What happened next was inspiring. A group of educators in our community decided to take it upon themselves to probe the comment further and create a space where folks could circle up and hear each other. From that moment on, I felt our community united even more with the aspiration of inclusivity and emancipation, a belief that inspires our school programming, our collaborative decision-making, and our relationships with each other.
Before we bridge to self-management, let's take some time for final reflections. Reflective opportunity 6. Consider the concept of inclusion and how its various meanings resonate across different contexts. Language, mineralogy, mathematics, political and personal experience. Reflect on inclusions from your own life that have helped shape who you are today. How have the intersections in your cultural background, personal experiences, and professional roles influenced your perspective on leadership, community, and identity? Reflective opportunity 7. Write about a specific moment or series of moments that exemplify how these inclusions have informed your approach to building inclusive environments. How do you see yourself in relation to others? And how do your decisions and actions impact both your immediate community and the broader world? Consider how the belief that I am you and you are me influences your leadership style and relationships with others. What challenges have you faced in striving to create space where everyone feels seen, heard, and valued? And how have these challenges shaped your growth as a leader? Thank you for the humility you are exhibiting and for the new competencies you are beginning to grow in the social awareness module. Let's hold space for Aris's translation of the Mayan belief, I am you and you are me, as we move forward in this work.
I'm Kirsten Cappy, the Executive Director of I'm Your Neighbor Books. This professional development was created at a particular time with a particular community of voices. Language, terminology, and perspectives constantly evolve and should evolve. At the time you navigate this training, those evolutions may have already taken place on any detail of this professional development. In 1993, Brian Street, academic anthropologist, coined the phrase, culture is a verb. It is an ever-flowing and evolving path to remaining curious. While these learning modules are fixed in time, the impact is fluid. The impact is a verb. Because cultural humility means we use the most up-to-date information, but also listen to the voices that came before us. This is an acknowledgement that we have and will make mistakes. We too are evolving. Our mission here is to guide all of us towards the pivotal goal of fostering a more equitable society. Thank you for doing this work with us.